In the sweltering heat of a Guam airfield in early 1945, a stocky figure with a perpetual cigar clenched between his teeth paced the concrete runway, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the Pacific Ocean met the sky. Major General Curtis LeMay, at just 39 years old, was a man forged in the crucible of aerial warfare, his face etched with the lines of countless missions and the weight of decisions that would define the end of World War II. LeMay wasn't born to command. He was shaped by the Great Depression's hardships in Ohio, where as a boy he delivered newspapers on a bicycle to help feed his family. His entry into aviation came through sheer determination. He borrowed money to take flying lessons and earned his wings in 1930, just as the world teetered on the edge of economic collapse. By the time World War II erupted, LeMay had risen through the ranks of the U.S. Army Air Corps, becoming a navigator and pilot known for his unyielding focus and tactical brilliance. LeMay's first taste of combat came in Europe, where he took command of the 305th Bomb Group in 1942. Stationed at RAF Grafton Underwood in England, his crews flew B-29 flying fortresses on daylight precision bombing missions over Nazi Germany, a doctrine championed by the U.S. Army Air Forces as morally superior to the British night area bombing. The theory was simple: hit factories and military targets with pinpoint accuracy using the Norden bomb site, minimizing civilian casualties while crippling the enemy's war machine. In practice, it was a nightmare. High-altitude flights at 25,000 feet exposed the bombers to freezing temperatures, where hydraulic fluid froze and oxygen systems failed. German flak was a deadly hailstorm, and Luftwaffe fighters pounced on the slow-moving formations like wolves on sheep. LeMay led from the front, often flying as a co-pilot in the lead aircraft, refusing to abort even when losses mounted. One infamous mission over Regensburg on August 17, 1943, saw his group lose 10 of 21 B-17s, a 48% casualty rate that haunted the survivors. Yet LeMay pressed on, his crews dubbing him Iron Ass for his refusal to turn back. He demanded perfection, endless briefings, rigorous training, and a no-excuses mentality. "If you're not killing Germans, you're getting killed," he would growl during debriefings, his cigar ash falling unnoticed on maps stained with coffee and sweat. These European campaigns taught LeMay harsh lessons about the limitations of precision bombing. The Norden site, advertised as accurate to within 100 feet, often missed by miles due to cloud cover, high winds, and evasive maneuvers. German industry was resilient, dispersed into underground factories and civilian homes. By late 1943, LeMay had overseen over 100 missions, earning the Distinguished Flying Cross and the Legion of Merit, but the strategic impact was underwhelming. Bomb damage assessments showed factories resuming production within weeks, while American losses exceeded 26,000 airmen killed or captured. Frustrated, LeMay began experimenting with low-level tactics during the Big Week offensive in February 1944, sending B-17s at 5,000 feet to evade radar and improve accuracy. The results were mixed: more hits, but heavier flak losses. Still, it planted a seed. Altitude was the enemy of effectiveness. When the call came to transfer to the Pacific Theater in January 1945, LeMay saw a chance to apply these lessons on a grander scale. The war against Japan was stalemated, with island-hopping campaigns like Iwo Jima costing thousands of Marine lives. Air power, he believed, could break the deadlock, if used without restraint. LeMay's new command, the 21st Bombing Command, was centered on the Boeing B-29 Superfortress, a technological behemoth that represented the pinnacle of American industrial might.
Conceived in 1940 as a response to Japan's aggression in China, the B-29 was designed to bomb the Japanese homeland from bases in India or China, flying higher and farther than any previous aircraft. The project was unprecedented in scope and cost. $3 billion, about $75 billion in today's dollars, involving 180,000 workers across multiple factories. Each superfortress cost $639,000, more than 3 B-17s, and featured innovations like a pressurized cabin for high-altitude comfort, remote-controlled turrets with .5 caliber machine guns, and engines capable of 40,000 feet. The bomb bay could hold 20,000 pounds of ordnance, and its range exceeded 5,000 miles with auxiliary tanks. President Franklin Roosevelt had demanded its deployment to avenge Pearl Harbor, but development was plagued by setbacks. The Wright R-3350 duplex Cyclone engines were notorious troublemakers, prone to overheating and catching fire due to faulty carburetors and oil lines. During testing at Boeing's Wichita plant, 2 prototypes crashed, killing test pilots. Production rush to meet deadlines led to quality issues. Welds cracked, propellers failed. By 1944, the first combat B-29s deployed to the China-Burma-India theater under Brigadier General Haywood S. Hansel, Jr., LeMay's predecessor. From bases like Chengdu, they struck Japanese cities, but results were dismal. High altitude, 30,000 feet, daylight raids with 2,000-pound high-explosive bombs scattered widely due to jet stream winds up to 200 miles per hour. Missions to Singapore or Bangkok often returned empty-handed, with aircraft lost to mechanical failures. One raid on Tokyo in November 1944 saw 111 B-29s drop bombs that missed the Nakajima aircraft factory by a mile, starting only scattered fires. Hansel clung to the precision doctrine, believing area bombing immoral and ineffective against Japan's dispersed cottage industries. But by December 1944, with the Marianas Islands, Guam, Saipan, and Tinian captured, bases closer to Japan became available, 1,500 miles away, halving flight times and fuel needs. LeMay arrived on Guam on January 20, 1945, inheriting a command demoralized by failures. The 73rd, 313th, and 314th Bomb Wings had lost over 50 B-29s to accidents alone, with crews calling them flying coffins. LeMay toured the fields, chewing out maintenance chiefs for shoddy work and ordering immediate fixes. He flew his first B-29 mission on January 29, 1945, a low-level radar bombing of Truk Atoll that destroyed oil tanks, his first taste of Pacific success. But raids on Japan continued to falter. On February 19, 1945, 141 B-29s hit Tokyo's Musashino aircraft factory. Only 20 bombs hit the target, the rest scattered over farmland. Japanese fighters and flak downed none, but the psychological blow was to American morale. LeMay pored over intelligence reports in his Quonset hut headquarters, maps pinned to walls under bare bulbs. Japan's cities were 60 to 70% wooden, with narrow streets and no modern firefighting. Factories were small, often in homes. High explosives punched holes. Fire would consume everything. Drawing from British experiences, Hamburg's 1943 Firestorm killed 40,000. LeMay proposed a radical shift, low-level incendiary raids at night. To understand LeMay's calculus, one must grasp Tokyo's vulnerability in 1945. Once a city of elegant wooden machiya houses and Shinto shrines, Tokyo had swelled to 7 million people, the world's largest metropolis. The Shitamachi district, eastern Tokyo's lowlands along the Sumida River, was the heart of working-class life, packed with 500,000 residents in 15 square miles. Homes were single-story timber frames with paper screens and tile roofs, separated by alleys barely wide enough for a rickshaw. Factories dotted the area, small machine shops making aircraft parts, textile mills producing uniforms, and arsenals assembling shells. Over 50% of Japan's war production came from such cottage industries, employing women and children on piecework. Air raid preparations were rudimentary. After the Doolittle raid in 1942, Tokyo built 200,000 backyard foxholes and 8,000 warden posts, but no deep shelters like London's underground. Fire breaks cleared 200,000 homes, creating rubble-strewn lots that ironically fueled fires. The water system, strained by blackouts and rationing, had pumps powered by scarce electricity. Firefighting relied on bucket brigades and 125,000 volunteers, many elderly or students. Japan's leadership knew the risks. Prime Minister Hideki Tojo had dismissed bombing threats, but by 1945, with U.S. carriers dominating the seas and Marines closing on Okinawa, panic set in. Evacuations moved 1 million children to the countryside, but adults stayed, bound by imperial duty. Propaganda urged resilience, every house a fortress. Yet morale cracked. Food shortages and Allied submarines strangled imports, leaving civilians on 1,500 calories daily. LeMay's intelligence, from OSS reports and photo reconnaissance, painted Tokyo as ripe for destruction. Zone 1, the target rectangle of 4 by 3 miles, held 250,000 people and key industries. A fire here could spread uncontrollably, forcing surrender by breaking civilian will.
By early March 1945, LeMay's staff finalized Operation Meetinghouse. No more high-altitude pinpricks. This would be total war from the air. On March 5th, after a successful incendiary raid on Kobe destroyed 2 square miles, LeMay greenlit the Tokyo strike for March 9th. The plan: 334 B-29s from 3 wings, launching at dusk to arrive over Tokyo around midnight. Pathfinders from the 73rd Wing would mark the target with M46 clusters, dropping 38 M69 napalm bomblets each, forming an X of fire. Main force bombers would follow in streams, flying at 5,000 to 8,000 feet, low enough for visual aiming, high enough to avoid small arms. To maximize payload, LeMay ordered defensive guns removed except tail turrets, saving 7,000 pounds per plane for bombs. No formation flying, each B-29 independent to reduce fuel use and collision risk. Armament: M46 clusters with 38 M69s, filled with napalm, jellied gasoline thickened with aluminum soap, igniting at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit and burning for 10 minutes. Each bomber carried 40 clusters, 1,520 bomblets, covering 2,000 by 400 feet when burst at 2,500 feet. The math was chilling. 279 effective bombers dropping 1,665 tons would saturate 16 square miles with overlapping fire patterns. Winds of 17 miles per hour would fan flames into a firestorm, consuming oxygen and creating 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit updrafts. LeMay briefed his commanders on March 7th in a smoke-filled tent. "We're going to burn them out," he said flatly. Doubts surfaced. Colonel John Chennault, son of the Flying Tigers' Claire Chennault, warned of flak losses. LeMay waved it off. "If we lose 50%, it's worth it." He flew the Pathfinder role himself in the Great Artiste, but weather kept him grounded. Captain Raymond Ajax Ludovici led instead. Crews loaded bombs under floodlights, the sticky napalm clusters gleaming ominously. Morale was mixed, excitement at striking the enemy capital, fear of the untested low-level tactic.
One pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Robert C. Wilson, wrote home, "This feels like crossing a line we can't uncross." March 9th dawned humid on Guam's North Field, home to the 314th Wing. At 4 p.m., engines whined to life. 325 B-29s, their silver fuselages scarred from previous missions. Takeoff began at 5:35 p.m., a thunderous procession down 8,500-foot runways built by Seabees in months. Each Superfortress, weighing 135,000 pounds, strained skyward, props chewing air. 17 aborted, engine fires, gear failures, but 325 climbed into the sunset, forming a stream 300 miles long. From Saipan and Tinian, another 50 joined, the total 334. Flight time, 7 hours at 220 miles per hour, crossing 1,500 miles of open ocean. Cabins were unpressurized below 10,000 feet, crews in leather jackets and oxygen masks, sipping coffee from thermoses. Navigation relied on low-ran radio fixes and celestial shots, with radar for backup. Fuel was critical. Each plane carried 8,000 gallons, enough for round trip plus 45 minutes reserve. Tensions mounted as darkness fell. Briefings had stressed radio silence, no chatter to alert Japanese listeners. Pathfinders led, 4 B-29s with extra radios circling Tokyo at 25,000 feet to guide stragglers. Over Iwo Jima, recently captured at 26,000 Marine casualties, searchlights probed but found nothing. The stream fragmented slightly, some planes lagging due to headwinds. At 11 p.m. Tokyo time, the first Pathfinders arrived, descending through scattered clouds. Visibility, 10 miles, winds 17 miles per hour from the southwest, perfect for fire spread. At 12:07 a.m. March 10th, the lead Pathfinder, Dynamite, released its M46s. The clusters burst at 2,500 feet and scattered 38 bomblets that ignited in geysers of flame, forming the guiding X over the Sumida River. Captain Robert Calm's voice crackled over command radio, "Lakes of fire, target area, solid blaze." The signal lit the night, visible 100 miles away.
The main force arrived in waves. 279 bombers streaming in from the south. At 5,000 feet, Tokyo sprawled below, a glittering web of lights dimmed by blackouts, but the Pathfinder fires pierced the gloom. Bombardiers peered through plexiglass, hearts pounding. Japanese searchlights swept the sky, flak bursts blooming like deadly flowers, but the low altitude and night confused gunners. The first clusters fell at 12:08 a.m., tumbling for 2,500 feet before exploding. Each M69, weighing 6 pounds, spewed napalm that stuck to wood, paper, and flesh, burning through rain if needed. Within minutes, hundreds of small fires dotted Shitamachi. Homes, shops, warehouses erupting in orange fury. Winds drove embers ahead, igniting new blazes before bombers arrived. By 12:30 a.m., fires merged into walls of flame 100 feet high, the roar audible over engine noise. On the ground, chaos erupted. Air raid sirens wailed at 12:10 a.m., wardens banging gongs, "Take cover," but foxholes filled with smoke and streets choked with panicking crowds. A housewife in Asakusa, Mrs. Akiko Tanaka, a pseudonym from post-war accounts, grabbed her children and ran for the Sumida, only to find bridges jammed. The sky rained fire, she recalled. People screamed, clothes melted to skin.
Fire wardens, armed with hooks and buckets, fought futilely. Water pressure failed as mains burst from heat. By 1 a.m., the firestorm formed. Updraft sucked oxygen from streets, creating 50-mile-per-hour winds that hurled debris like shrapnel. Asphalt bubbled, metal warped, glass fused into black webs. The Sumida River boiled, fish floating belly up, as hundreds drowned or burned jumping in. One B-29 crew reported seeing rivers of fire where canals ignited from oil slicks. The raid peaked from 12:30 to 2 a.m., bombers circling in patterns to ensure coverage. Some overshot due to smoke, bombing outskirts, but 90% hit Zone 1. Total ordnance, 1,665 tons, more incendiaries than dropped on any European city. Japanese defenses faltered. Key 45 night fighters scrambled, but couldn't locate targets in the haze. Only 76 sightings, 40 attacks, none successful. Flak downed 14 B-29s, crews bailing into the inferno or ditching at sea. One, Fickle Fanny, exploded mid-air from turbulence, killing all 10. But losses were light, 4%, validating LeMay's tactics. As the last bombers turned south at 2:45 a.m., Tokyo was a cauldron. Smoke rose 18,000 feet, visible from Honshu's mountains. Crews smelled charred flesh at altitude, some vomiting. Tailgunner Sergeant Edward Johnson later said, "It looked like the end of the world. No hate, just finality." By dawn on March 10th, the firestorm had consumed 16 square miles, destroying 267,171 buildings, more urban area than any raid in history. Estimates of dead ranged from 80,000 to 130,000, surpassing Dresden's toll. Bodies filled canals, charred beyond recognition. Post-war crews cleared 100,000 using bulldozers. Survivors wandered ash-choked streets. Many burned over 80% of bodies. Hospitals overflowed, morphine scarce. One doctor at Konda Hospital treated 500 cases, amputating limbs without anesthesia. Children orphaned, families vaporized, entire blocks where only foundations remained. The Tokyo Fire Department lost 1,200 men, 96 engines melted. Civil defense collapsed, wardens died directing evacuations. Post-war U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey interviewed survivors. A factory worker described winds pulling people into flames like leaves. A schoolgirl saw mothers clutching babies, then gone in smoke. Economically, Shitamachi's industries, 20% of Japan's aircraft production, were gutted. But the real blow was psychological. Tokyo's spirit broke. Evacuations accelerated, morale plummeted. Emperor Hirohito's court debated surrender, though militarists resisted. LeMay's crews landed on Guam at dawn, exhausted. Debriefings revealed horror. Photos showed a blackened scar where a city stood. LeMay, monitoring from command post, lit another cigar. "We hit 'em hard," he said. But privately, some officers questioned the cost. The raid's success led to 67 more firebombings, burning 40% of urban Japan, killing 500,000. Meetinghouse wasn't just a raid, it was a threshold crossed, where air power became apocalypse.
As the last B-29s of Operation Meetinghouse wheeled south over the smoldering ruins of Tokyo at 2:45 a.m. on March 10, 1945, the full scope of the devastation began to unfold on the ground below. The Firestorm, fueled by 17-mile-per-hour winds and the highly flammable construction of the city's wooden neighborhoods, raged unchecked through the night, creating updrafts that sucked oxygen from the streets and hurled burning embers across blocks like fiery shrapnel. By dawn, when the first rays of sun pierced the 18,000-foot smoke pall hanging over the Kanto Plain, Tokyo's Shitamachi district, the densely packed working-class heartland along the Sumida River, had been transformed into a blackened wasteland. 16 square miles of urban fabric lay in ashes, an area larger than Manhattan's core, where over 267,000 buildings, homes, factories, and shrines had stood just hours before. The U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, dispatched in the war's final months, would later document the scale. 1.5 million people homeless, entire families vaporized in their sleep, and streets clogged with charred corpses melted together in grotesque piles up to 6 feet high. Civil defense officials, overwhelmed and exhausted, abandoned firefighting efforts by 1:30 a.m., shifting to rescue operations that proved futile against the inferno's intensity. The Tokyo Fire Department, with its 125,000 volunteers and 8,000 wardens, suffered catastrophic losses. Over 1,200 firefighters dead, 96 engines melted into slag, and water mains ruptured by the 1,800-degree Fahrenheit heat that boiled the Sumida River and fused glass into black, spiderweb-like patterns on the ground. Survivors' accounts, collected in post-war testimonies, paint a scene of biblical horror. A 16-year-old girl named Tsukiyama, huddled in a makeshift shelter with her siblings, recalled the air turning thick like soup as flames leapt from roof to roof, pulling people into the blaze like leaves in a gale. "We ran for the river, but the water was on fire. Oil from the bombs floating and burning," she said. "My mother held my hand, then she was gone, just a shadow in the smoke." Thousands drowned in canals or the Sumida, preferring suffocation to the flames, while others trampled each other on bridges like the Kototoi, where a single B-29's full load landed in a crowd of evacuees, incinerating hundreds in an instant. The death toll, initially estimated at 80,000 by Japanese authorities to preserve morale, climbed to over 100,000 in U.S. assessments, more civilians killed in one night than in the atomic bombings of Hiroshima or Nagasaki as isolated events. Bodies were so numerous and decomposed by the heat that cleanup crews used bulldozers and hooks, stacking remains in parks for mass cremation, the acrid smoke lingering for days. Hospitals like Kanda overflowed with the burned and asphyxiated. Surgeons performed amputations without anesthesia, rationing morphine for children whose skin sloughed off in sheets. Orphaned kids wandered the rubble, calling for parents who would never answer, and the psychological scars ran deep. Survivors like 21-year-old Kyoka described nights of screaming silence, where the roar of phantom engines haunted sleep. Economically, the raid gutted 20% of Japan's aircraft production, destroying small machine shops in homes where women and students assembled propellers and wiring under dim lanterns.
Yet the true weapon was terror. Tokyo's spirit fractured, with evacuation surging as civilians fled to countryside relatives, overloading rail lines already strained by war shortages. Emperor Hirohito's court, briefed in hushed tones at the imperial palace, debated the raid's implications. Militarists like General Yoshijiro Umezu dismissed it as barbarian access, but realists saw the writing in the ashes. America's will to destroy was boundless. On the American side, the returning B-29 crews landed at Northfield on Guam and Isley Field on Saipan between 8 a.m. and noon, their aircraft reeking of smoke and napalm residue that seeped into flight suits. Debriefings in canvas-walled tents were somber affairs. Pilots and bombardiers recounting the surreal sight of a city reduced to a glowing wound. Captain Robert Comm, who led the Pathfinders in Dynamite, described circling at 8,000 feet as flying over Hell's Forge, the fires so bright they lit the undersides of clouds. Tail gunners like Sergeant William McAfee spoke of the odor of burning flesh wafting up at 5,000 feet, forcing men to retch into paper bags while maintaining formation. Losses were lighter than feared. 14 B-29s down, 96 airmen killed or missing, 6 wounded. But each empty cot in the barracks weighed heavy. 5 crews ditched in the Philippine Sea and were rescued by submarines like the USS Piho, their tales of bobbing in rafts amid shark-infested waters, adding to the night's drama. Major General Curtis LeMay, monitoring from his headquarters in a requisitioned plantation house, lit his umpteenth cigar upon hearing the reports. "We finally got their attention," he told aides, his voice gravelly from chain smoking. Privately, he calculated the raid's success. 90% of bombs on target, minimal fighter interceptions, and destruction exceeding all prior efforts combined. But even LeMay, the unflinching tactician, later admitted in his memoir, Mission with LeMay, a twinge of unease, not regret, but recognition that the line between warfare and atrocity had blurred. His subordinates were more vocal. Brigadier General Roger Ramey, commander of the 314th Wing, called it a night of pure destruction, while some crews refused further low-level missions, citing the moral strain. Back in Washington, General Henry Hap Arnold, chief of the Army Air Forces, praised the results in a teletype to LeMay. "Magnificent achievement. Proceed with similar operations." President Franklin D. Roosevelt, frail from polio and war strain, received briefings that highlighted the raid's role in hastening Japan's collapse, though public disclosure was censored to avoid anti-war backlash. The immediate strategic aftermath unfolded rapidly. Emboldened by Meetinghouse's triumph, LeMay escalated the firebombing campaign, targeting 67 Japanese cities in the following months. Nagoya fell on March 11th and 12th, its textile district burning out 2 square miles and killing 5,000. Osaka on March 13th and 14th saw 8 square miles razed, displacing 400,000. Kobe and Yokohama followed, their wooden wards fueling infernos that rivaled Tokyo's. By April, 40% of Japan's urban areas lay in ruins, with total civilian deaths from incendiaries reaching 500,000, more than all Pacific Theater ground combat combined. LeMay refined the tactics, B-29s stripped of all but tail guns to carry extra bomb loads, flying even lower at 500 miles per hour to evade flak, earning the nickname LeMay's Suicide Express from crews. Japanese defenses crumbled. Night fighters like the K-45 Toryu scored few kills, radar jammed by chaff, and anti-aircraft gunners fired blindly into smoke.
Production shifted underground to caves and rural sites, but the psychological toll was irreparable. Workers deserted factories, black marketeering surged, and food riots erupted in unbombed areas. The raids accelerated Japan's surrender timeline. Without them, historians like Richard Frank argue, the planned invasion of Kyushu, Operation Olympic, in November 1945 might have cost 1 million American lives. Yet the moral controversy ignited immediately and endures. In Allied command circles, Hansel, relieved by LeMay for his ineffective precision raids, criticized the shift as terror bombing, echoing British debates over Dresden. Post-war, LeMay faced hypothetical war crimes trials if America lost. "I'd have been the first on the stand," he quipped in 1965, defending it as necessary to end the war swiftly. Critics, including Japanese survivors and scholars like Mark Selden, label it a forgotten Holocaust, pointing to the civilian focus. Shitamachi had few military targets, mostly homes and small shops. The Geneva Conventions of 1949, influenced by such raids, banned indiscriminate attacks. But in 1945, total war justified extremes. American veterans grappled with guilt. B-29 pilot Paul Tibbets, later of the Enola Gay, said the fire raids broke my heart, witnessing rivers of flame from Hiroshima's precursor missions. Japanese perspectives add depth. Novelist Kenzaburo Oe, a child during the war, wrote of the black snow of ash falling miles away, symbolizing national trauma. Memorials like the Tokyo air raids victims' cenotaph honor the dead with cranes folded from charred paper, a poignant reminder of lost innocence. Strategically, Meetinghouse paved the way for atomic bombs. Truman's decision to drop Little Boy and Fat Man on August 6th and 9th was framed as escalation, not invention, of area destruction. Without firebombing's precedent, the nukes might have faced more resistance. LeMay's legacy is dual-edged, hailed as the savior who shortened the war, vilified as an architect of civilian slaughter. Rising to Air Force Chief of Staff in 1961, he shaped Cold War doctrine, massive retaliation against the Soviets, until his hawkish stance during Vietnam led to clashes with President Kennedy. His 1968 vice presidential run with George Wallace underscored his unapologetic militarism. "We should bomb North Vietnam back to the Stone Age." Post-war, Japan rebuilt Tokyo into a gleaming metropolis, but scars remain. Survivors' associations lobby against glorifying the raids, while U.S. textbooks often gloss over the Firestorm's horror, focusing on victory. Ethical debates persist. Was it genocide or grim necessity? Utilitarians cite saved lives. Humanists decry the dehumanization of 100,000 souls. LeMay died in 1990, buried at Arlington with full honors, his grave a focal point for reflection. Operation Meetinghouse didn't just burn Tokyo, it scorched the conscience of modern warfare, forcing us to confront when destruction serves peace or merely begets more death. The embers of March 10, 1945, still smolder in history's shadow, a cautionary blaze against the perils of unrestrained power.